You're listening to Pending by Jamie, or PBJ, a podcast where we talk about books, news, pop culture, and everything in between. Today I wanted to talk about the Game Changers book series. This is a series of 6 romance novels written by Canadian author Rachel Reed. Each book follows the love story of a different professional hockey player in the same universe. So how did I find out about this series? I first saw it through Instagram. There was a lot of buzz around the release of the Heated Rivalry TV series, which adapted books 1 and 2. People were reading the books in preparation for the show, but the books had been labelled largely as smut, which is not a genre that I usually read. Then, at the end of 2025, the TV series finally dropped on HBO Max, and I started seeing lots of clips talking about how good the show was. I started to come around to it when I heard there was a really good love story. Eventually, I watched the show because I was feeling a bit FOMO, and I got really into it. I've watched it 4 times.
What did he say?
I actually posted my thoughts about the show on my blog, and I'll be happy to make another PBJ episode just to cover my thoughts on the TV show, but that's for another time. Going back to the books, I decided to read the series because the central couple in the TV series continues their story in book 6 and an unreleased book 7 that was just announced earlier this year. So while waiting for season 2 of the show to drop in 2027, I decided it would be a good time to actually read the original source material which inspired the show, so that I can fully engage in the fan content, which includes a lot of spoilers from the whole series. I am happy to report that I have finished reading the entire 6-book series, so here are my thoughts of each of the books in chronological order. Book 1 is Game Changer. This is the first book in the series that introduces us to the Game Changers universe. This first story is set in New York and follows Scott Hunter and Kip Grady. Scott is a professional hockey player and Kip is a broke history grad who is working in a smoothie shop. They have a chance encounter at Kip's workplace and things escalate from there. I don't want to reduce these books to tropes, but I wanted to give a sense of the main arcs of all of these books without giving too much away. For me, the main arc of this book is kind of a prince and the pauper vibe, and I think this aspect of their individual lives is satisfactorily resolved at the end, which was quite nice. There's also the dynamic of Scott, the hockey player, being closeted due to his hostile work environment, aka the Professional Hockey League, versus Kip, who is out to his friends, family, everyone. So there's this tension where they have to keep the romance a secret in order to protect Scott's career. I thought the book was okay. I liked the prince and the pauper plot, and as I said, I thought it was well resolved in the end. For me, what I didn't like about this book was the smut. I felt like the sex scenes in the book were quite repetitive and almost gratuitous at times. I wanted to skip some of them because I felt like they didn't quite serve a purpose in moving the story forward. And for me, what really is more interesting to me is the romantic plotline, or like how their relationship comes together. Book 2 is Heated Rivalry, which follows the central characters in the TV series. So this story follows the top 2 ice hockey players in the same league, and they are pitted against each other by the league while they hook up behind closed doors. Shane Hollander is the Canadian superstar, and Ilya Rozanov is the Russian who joins the rival team. They play a lot of games against each other, and sparks fly from the first moment that they meet. I will classify this couple as a lust to love situation, almost enemies to lovers, except they never really hated each other at all. The main tension in the story is the fact that they are both closeted, and they both have to remain closeted if they want to keep playing hockey. Their story was also very vast in scope, spanning almost 10 years from when they first meet to when the book ends. Something unexpected about this book was that it was actually really funny. It was the funniest book, I think, out of all of the books, mostly thanks to the Ilya character. The only thing I wish existed about this book was a nice timeline that helped to lay out all the key points in the book and their relationship in chronological order. The story is told in chronological order, but the problem is that there's quite a lot of time jumps and skips, which I feel are quite important to the story, because as much as it's important to know what happens when they are together, I feel like the time that they spend apart is also part of that story of how much time has passed between them and what has changed or not changed in that time that they are apart. So for me, it was a bit hard to keep track of how much time has passed, and that sense of scale, the fact that they had been sort of going back and forth for 10 years before they finally resolved their relationship in the end. This is not a spoiler, by the way. Everything resolves at the end of the book. So yeah, I would have liked to see the timeline, but I kind of get that you can't do that, because then that's just a spoiler, right? For the key points in their relationship. But I'm sure there are fan-made ones online that I can refer to. Book 3 is called Tough Guy. I thought the book was okay, but it's not my personal favorite. So this story follows Ryan Price and Fabian Salah. Ryan is an enforcer who changes teams very often. So he is a hockey player, but he plays in this quote-unquote position known as an enforcer. His role is apparently to fight other people. I don't know. Don't ask me, man. Even after 6 books, I haven't exactly learned anything new about ice hockey. Coming from a tropical country, I don't know that much about it, so it surprised me that fighting is considered legal and seen as part of the game. Like, I've seen some clips, and I'm pretty sure the audience is like egging them on when they start fighting, and like, wow, gloves off, and then they start punching each other. So apparently Ryan, that's kind of his role. Very perplexing, but okay, fine. Anyway, Ryan's counterpart is Fabian, who is described as a flamboyant musician who hates hockey players. I like the backstory of the two characters because they have some history, and then there's that yin and yang of how different they are, kind of opposites attract situation. Another part of their individual story is that Ryan has anxiety, which I thought was interesting to read about. And then for Fabian, he's this famous musician who's super confident in himself, so I like that contrast between the two characters. Otherwise, I felt like there wasn't anything particularly memorable about this book. I wasn't particularly interested in the smut as much either, though I feel like there was still an improvement from book 1 in terms of trying to edit the book more tightly. Next is book 4, which is Common Goal. Unfortunately, this book might be my least favorite. The story is an age-gap romance following Eric Bennett and Kyle Swift. Eric is a 40-plus-year-old goalie who is planning to retire at the end of the season, while Kyle is a young 20-something bartender at the Kingfisher, which is a gay bar that Kip likes to go to in book 1. Callback. I was initially quite interested in the story because I thought the vibe of the characters didn't feel that bad. Like, they both like art, which intrigued me. But it was just kind of boring. I don't know. The book took me the longest to finish reading because there wasn't anything particularly interesting about the story, which felt like a bit of a shame. There seemed like there was quite a lot of good ground to cover, and I mean, there's a reason why the May December age gap thing does get brought up now and again in popular culture, right? So I feel like there was some material there, but it just didn't materialize. More specifically, the characters both had some kind of baggage that contributed to the tension between them and why they shouldn't be together, but I feel like that tension wasn't properly explored. The characters were mostly just ponder about it. They think like, oh, I shouldn't do this, should I not? And then they eventually get together, then they stop caring. I feel like there's more to that backstory, and there was no... The backstories were not really resolved, I feel. So it didn't feel that satisfying, I think, this particular book. Either that or I was just bored lah. Okay, now we're on the up and up, so it gets good, I promise. So book 5 is Role Model. The story follows Troy Barrett and Harris Drover. So Troy is a professional hockey player who gets traded at the start of the book to a smaller team because he stood up to a former teammate and best friend after that best friend was accused of committing sexual assault on several women. His counterpart is Harris Drover, who's the team's social media manager. Yes. And so he transfers to a smaller team, right? This new team, the team captain is none other than Ilya Rozanov. So this story is a bad boy redemption kind of thing, where Troy has done some bad things in the past, but he's growing into a better person by the influence of the people around him. He also happens to find love in the process. Personally, I love a good redemption story, and because of this very strong storyline, personal growth, I enjoyed the story a lot more. I think the love story was kind of a bonus, and the smut was sprinkled in where it was relevant, so I liked that it didn't feel like the smut was just trying to prop up the novel. And it was meaty enough on its own. I have to admit that Rozanov is maybe part of why I enjoyed this book as much as I did. I find the man is a true comedian. Bonus points also to this book for introducing a team puppy. Hehe, so cute! Book 6 is The Long Game. This is potentially my favorite book, though I think I would love to give this a second reading to be sure. The story continues more or less where we left off in Book 2. So the central couple here is still Shane and Ilya from Book 2, Heated Rivalry. Now Shane and Ilya, they've kind of resolved their are we something, are we not from Book 2, and then now they're working closer to each other. Shane is still playing for Montreal and Ilya is now in Ottawa, that smaller team. They're still keeping their relationship a secret to the public and are only open to some of their close friends and family. They have a long-term plan for their relationship, but that plan is like 10 years down the road. For now, their ability to continue playing hockey comes first. That's their career and that's kind of their passion. This book also starts to unpack Ilya Rozanov's personal struggles with mental health. In this book, I like the depiction of depression and therapy that comes through Ilya Rozanov's backstory. I would also love to read more stories like this where the couples are already together, but the story is about them overcoming some kind of obstacle or hurdle together. I did feel like this book was a little bit sadder than Book 2, but it's still so funny at some parts. And I think like it has the kind of emotional beats that I like. Personally, I like this maybe more than Book 2 because in Book 2 it's kind of a yearning thing, or like will we, won't we, and there's this weird back and forth of they don't really know what to do with each other, but here they are committed already. It's just trying to work together towards something, and you get to see them how they interact with each other as a couple when they have disagreements or when they are not aligned, which I find to be quite refreshing when most romance stories tend to be about the process of getting together. This book also has so many scenes of domestic bliss, so I feel like I'm reading fanfiction almost. I particularly love the ending. I really, really loved it, and I can't wait to see it on screen already. If you know, you know. So now to my final ranking. I think you would have seen in the first slide already, but in my bottom tier, unfortunately, it would be Tough Guy, Common Goal, and Game Changer. Not in any particular order, and they're not terrible, it's just that I didn't really enjoy them, and I don't think I would read them again. Like, they wouldn't be rereads. If I had to segregate them, I would say my second favorites would be Heated Rivalry and Role Model, and then my favorite book of the 6 books so far would be The Long Game, just because of how unique I think it is in the romance genre, at least from what I have read so far. Now I wanted to talk a bit about advice, because now that I've seen both the show and read the books, do I think you should do one or the other first? Because I always wonder this when I see an adaptation. I am always inclined to read the books first. But in this case, I actually watched the show first because the books weren't available in the library. I had to buy them actually. So I watched the show first, then I read the books in chronological order. So my personal take, I don't think you need to read the book first. Like I was pretty happy watching the show without having read the book. But I do think if you read the book first, it would have been easier to understand the inner world of both of these characters on the show, because in the show you can't see their internal monologue, so sometimes it's very reliant on how they are able to put that across on screen, either through some kind of visuals, the storytelling, script writing, or just the pure acting coming from the actors. But for me, I found it a little bit difficult to interpret sometimes. Like, I didn't really understand why they were fighting, for example, when nothing happened. Like, when there's tension and stuff is unspoken, it was a bit difficult for me to figure out what was going on. So when I read the books and I understood both of their points of view, it was a bit easier for me to kind of buy into what was happening and root for them in that sense. Still, the show, I think, by itself is very good. You don't have to read the book in order to enjoy the show. I think a lot of people enjoyed the show on its own. If you do want to read the books, I think there's a question of what order you have to read the books in, because there are 6 books in total, which is a lot. I think you can just read, if let's say you are only interested in the 2 main characters, you can, if you want, just read books 2 and book 6. I personally read them in chronological order, which I think is the best order to read them, because you learn about different characters in that particular order, and in terms of the timeline, it actually is in chronological order, I think, when you read them like that. Except for book 2, because they go 10 years back in time, but otherwise it's generally in chronological order, so it's best to go from 1 all the way through 6. But I have to admit, I do think that maybe you can skip 1, 3, and 4, because those weren't my personal favorites. I think only 2, 5, and 6 are more interconnected. Take with that what you will. I think don't let me stop you, I suppose. I think you can still try. If this kind of is in your ballpark, or any of these sound like things that you're interested in, I think you can still give it a go. In the end, I ended up reading all of them anyway. The fact that I was able to finish any of the books to begin with, I think is a compliment on its own. Moving on, I wanted to just give some of my thoughts on the genre. So, the series is often classified as hockey romance / smut, meaning it's a romance in a hockey setting, which is apparently a very popular sub-genre of sports romance. I haven't read smut before either, but after reading the whole series, I don't think my preferences have changed. It was definitely an interesting new experience, and I liked kind of the sports aspect of it more. At some points I was like, okay, we need more hockey actually. I need less of this and more hockey, which I think was the best in book 6, which is partially why I liked it so much. In terms of sports romance, I had ever tried, I think it was this book called Icebreaker about, I don't know if it was a hockey player and a figure skater, and I tried it because I at one point was pretty interested in ice skating, but I got an immediate ick because the ice skating information was kind of inaccurate. Like, she was trying to do, I don't know, like a quad axel or something, and I was like, okay, dude, there's only how many women who have been able to do a triple axel in competition in the whole history of ice skating. I can't like take this seriously. So I felt like when there's zero respect for the sport in the book, and you're kind of just using it as window dressing, then it kind of turns me off. In this case, for the ice hockey one, to be fair, I don't know anything about ice hockey, so it could be completely wildly inaccurate and I wouldn't know. But I think for sports that I understand well, I would give extra bonus brownie points to those who actually respect the sport, they love the sport, and they want to do it justice, or they want to portray it correctly. So there's some other sports romance that I'm excited for. I think obviously book 7, Unrivaled, which is supposed to come out in 2027. That will continue Ilya and Shane's storyline. The other book that I'm aware of is Smash or Pass, which is a sapphic beach volleyball thing. I think it's a YA book though, because the characters are 16 years old. But I started playing beach volleyball this year, so I was definitely interested to see this on some of the upcoming release announcements, and so I might pick it up when it comes out in the middle of the year. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's it. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. Have you read this series? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I would love to hear from you. As always, I hope you had a good time, and I'll talk to you all soon. Bye bye.